Good morning, everyone. I thought we would up our daily Mishnah learning, where we spend just 3 or 4 minutes looking at a different Mishnah each day, trying to draw a quick degree of inspiration. The Mishnah I chose for today can be found in the Gemara Bava Batra, 7b, right, the second page of page number 7, and I picked the Gemara element, description of how we find the page, because I want to look at the Gemara as well as the Mishnah. The Mishnah itself starts off, Kofi noto livnot beit sha'ar v'del l'chatzer, that members of a communal courtyard, members of a courtyard who share a same courtyard, they're able to obligate the fellow members of the courtyard, in other words, tax them, in order to build a gate for their communal courtyard, and to build a door to protect themselves. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel says, no, lo kol chatzerot re'uot lebeit shar, that not every courtyard requires a gate, not every courtyard requires a door, and so you have to look at the individual circumstances. For example, a courtyard that is off of in biblical times, a public thoroughfare, there might be people walking the public thoroughfare who would peek into your courtyard, walk into your courtyard, and that perhaps deserves having a gate. However, if you lived in a much more private area, maybe the gate is not really necessary, and if that's not really necessary, it doesn't seem fair to force every member of the courtyard to expend funds in order to pay for the gate that's not actually necessary. The Mishnah then continues. Similarly, kofinoto livnot le'ir choma, that if you are a member of a city and the city needs a wall and doors and a crossbar to protect that city from invaders, so then you can force everyone in the city to pay taxes as well in order to build that wall and that defense system. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, he again says, lo kol iriyot, not every city requires the same type of defense in the wall, and so therefore you can't obligate every single person in that same fashion. The Gemara goes on and the commentary is a very fascinating discussion on taxes, because the question that arises is, how do you enforce people to pay their share in building that wall or building that gate? Do you do it according to the number of people that live in each house, and therefore those who are benefiting from it? Do you do it according to need or ability? For example, those who live very close to the wall are probably the ones who benefit most from being protected, right? If there's, God forbid, an invasion, they're the ones who are going to be impacted first and most severely. So perhaps you raise more funds from them. On the other hand, those who are living at the outskirts of a town probably are the poorest of the community, and maybe they're not able to, and perhaps you therefore charge people in the more central part of the city more because they have the ability to do so. All this is a very fascinating discussion, but it's not what I want to focus on today. What I want to focus on today is the beginning of the Gemara right after this Mishnah. Right, the Mishnah starts off by saying you can force people in a courtyard who share a courtyard together to build a gate. The Gemara right away says, wait a second, don't we have a story, don't we have a tradition that there was a very pious man, so pious in fact that Eliyahu Hanavi, Elijah the prophet, would come and speak to him regularly. It's a sign, if Elijah the prophet was speaking to him, that clearly he's a very special individual. We have the story that this very pious individual built a gatehouse, okay? And then Eliyahu stopped visiting him and stopped speaking to him, suggesting that the building of the gatehouse was actually something problematic. And the rabbis go on, what exactly was it? Well, it prevented the poor people to come into the courtyard and ask for money, to beg, to be able to sustain themselves. The Gemara then goes on and says, well, there are different cases. It depends where you put the gate. Did you put a door as well so that the poor person couldn't even peek his eyes in, or if he shouted for help, he wouldn't have even been heard? But for me, the most fascinating, important part of the whole story, of course, is the very first concern the rabbis have is what putting this gate in front of your courtyard, protecting yourself, protecting your family, what is this going to do in terms of your relationship with other people, particularly those who are weakest in society? Right? The rabbis are not opposed to you protecting yourself, but they want you to be careful. When you protect yourself, make sure it doesn't come at the expense of your relationship and your concern with other people. Make sure that the poor still have ability to access and ask you for assistance, and that you're prepared to do so as well. I just thought I'd end with a story that sort of emphasizes this point about when we separate ourselves, and very often there's a positive reason to separate ourselves. We're living during Corona time, so we certainly understand that. But know that there's a cost, and therefore one has to do so carefully and balance the challenges. This is a story I first heard from Rav David Ebner, and he tells the story of the Prushim. These were a group of people who lived in Jerusalem in the 1800s, who were very, very holy, very, very pious, and very often they would separate themselves from everyone else. They would not converse with other people, not socialize with other people, so that they could focus and dedicate themselves exclusively to Torah study. And some of them would sort of go into almost a hermit-like environment and seclude themselves and learn for 5 days, 10 days, 30 days, and gain a tremendous amount of Torah learning as a result. So there's this one individual who didn't just do 30 days, he didn't just do a year, he did 30 years. Now you can imagine how much Torah you could accomplish and learn in 30 years without any distractions whatsoever. And so at the end of that time, he, of course, was an incredible scholar, and he wanted to sort of be recognized as this scholar. And so he went to the leading rabbi of the community and asked to be tested. He said, I've learned so much for so many years without any interruptions from anyone. I really think I've accomplished a lot. Test me. And the rabbi asked him a very simple question. What is it that God wants from us? What does God expect from us? This, of course, was not the question he expected. He thought it'd be a very detailed question on the minutia of halacha. It would be a Rabbi Akiva Eger on, some esoteric topic and some very rare Talmudic passage. And he was ready for that, but he wasn't ready for this more philosophical question. What is it that God wants from us? So he struggled a little bit. He threw out some ideas, but none of them were really very compelling. And since this is a Hasidic story, you can have him come back, the next day and the next day, still struggle, but I'll cut straight to the chase. The rabbi told him as follows. What it is that God wants you to know and what expects from us is as follows. In the very beginning of the Mishnah Brura speaks about the importance of feeling God's presence constantly, waking up in the morning and being prepared to serve God. And in doing so, in the Be'or Halacha, he asks, or he quotes the following verse. And he says as follows. The verse says as follows. Is it possible that a person could hide from me, God, and I will not see him? How is that possible? Right? The idea that the Mr. Brewer is trying to point out here is that God is always watching. You can't hide from God at all. The Rebbe in this story says that's not what the verse really means. What God wants you to know is this is how you're supposed to read that particular verse. Yes, it is possible that a person can hide in the hiddenmost places. Not from me, God, but from other people. It's possible that you can go and for 30 years not have any interaction with other people and seclude yourselves. Yes, it's entirely possible that you can hide. And you might accomplish a tremendous amount in that time period. However, if you do so, va'ani lo ra'enu. If you do that, I, God, will not see you. I will not find it favorable. You're separating yourself from other people. Even if you're doing so for positive reasons, that's not something that I, as God, can accept. And so here too we see a very valuable, a very reasonable and valuable goal. In this case, to learn Torah. In the case of our Mishnah, it's to protect yourself, to create a gate to protect yourself from the outside world. In Corona, it's to protect yourselves from virus. All positive, noteworthy things. But the Gemara, and here in this case, the Hasidic story, remind us, when you separate yourself from others, there's a spiritual and communal cost to pay. And so make sure that when you do so in a way that doesn't permanently separate you from others, doesn't hermeneutically seal you off from others, but allows you to maintain that relationship, because that's the way you'll also maintain your relationship with God.